Hello, hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of King of Commercial Real Estate. Marjorie Roman here, and we have the amazing, that king in the house, Dolf de Roos. Thank you for coming today.
My pleasure, Marjorie. Great to see you again.
And today we're going to talk about investing, but for a young age, because we would love to teach this to all our children, and it doesn't get taught in kindergarten or high school or things like that. So how can we prepare our children to start investing if we don't teach them at a young age?
Well, you're absolutely right in that school doesn't teach, even for 1 hour, anything about financial freedom. You mentioned kindergarten. It's primary school, it's intermediate, it's secondary, and then tertiary education. It's horrifying that kids end up leaving this educational system and they don't even know how to balance a checkbook. And you might say, well, checks are going out of fashion. We won't have them run for much longer. But they don't really learn anything other than how to earn money by swapping time. And they have a skill that they try and sell, swapping time for money. And I don't mind whether it's $15 an hour or $1,500 an hour. It's not passive income. It's active income.
That's right. They depend on that job. Otherwise, they wouldn't be getting that income. And at the same time, I feel like there's also this culture of just spending your money and however many beautiful things you can see out there on the market. And there's not a culture of saving or anything related to that either.
Well, we always say that people spend money they don't have to impress people they don't know, to buy things they don't need with money they don't have. You know, it's just crazy. So the best way of teaching kids anything is not by telling them to do something, but by showing by examples. Kids, dogs too, by the way, animals do the same thing, but they like to model those around them, those that have authority around them. So kids love to do what they see their parents doing. That's why these, make-believe cooking sets or other kind of things are so popular, because they just want to emulate what they see their parents do.
That's true.
So I think one of the best things, if you want to teach passive income, is to show them how they can make it in something that's relatable to them.
That is true. So what are some of the ways that you have used personally with your daughter to teach her about passive income at such a young age?
Well, I've got quite a pertinent example, because at some stage when my daughter, I think was 4 or 5, she said to me, "Dad, I'd like a gumball machine." And in a fit of not thinking, I must have said, "Well, that's nice. If ever we find one, we might be able to get it." So I forgot about it. But then it was 2 or 3 years later when we were driving through town and I came across an open house. And it was in a nice suburb. And I said, "Oh, it's an open house. Let's go and check this out." And she, being 7 or 8 at that stage, said, "Oh, not another open house." Meaning, she's sick of looking at real estate. What interest could it possibly have for a little kid, right? I said, "Oh, come on, it'll be fun. You'll never know what we'll come across." So we went inside and had a look. And not only were they selling the house, but they were selling all the contents as well.
Oh.
And so at one stage, my daughter comes running to me and says, Dad, they're selling a gumball machine." And I said, "Oh, that's nice." And she said, "Yeah, but remember, you said if ever we find one, we can buy it."
Oh.
Now, remember, I'm the parent and she's the kid, right? So just because a parent says that, that doesn't mean to say we have to do that, right?
Well, at the same time, you kind of promised her that.
Exactly.
So where's your word?
How can
there?
we hope to teach kids about integrity if we don't hold our own word to them? So I said to her, "I said that?" And she said, "Yes." I said, "Well, then we better find out what they want for it." So I said to the elderly guy selling everything, I said, "How much do you want for the gumball machine?" And he said, "Where's your accent from?" And I said, "I don't have one. You have one. It's called American accent." He said, "Very funny. What do you do?" I said, "I'm in real estate." He said, "Residential?" I said, "Largely commercial." He said, "Why don't you come back tomorrow and we'll discuss it over a coffee?" And I said, "Okay, I'll bring some biscuits." And he said, "Well, what are they?" And I said, "Well, they're cookies." But anyway, so we came back the next morning. And he had this gumball machine tied with a red ribbon around it in the pathway leading up to this massive main door.
Oh, wow.
And I suspect that he might have known who I was, and he was trying to impress me, to ingratiate himself with me so that we might do a deal on the real estate. I'm not sure about that. But either way, he gave this gumball machine to my daughter.
Oh, that's
So we manhandled it into the car, and it was quite large. It barely fit in the car, and it wasn't a small car. And then we're driving home, and I said, "He gave it to you." And she said, "I know." I said, "Well, that means it's yours and you can decide what to do with it." She said, "Cool." And I said, "Well, as far as I see it, there are 3 things you could do with it." And she said, "Okay, what are they?" I said, "Well, the first one is we could fill it with gumballs, and you can eat 4 or 5 every day, and we can make you and the dentist very happy." And she said, "I kind of like that idea. What's the second idea?" I said, "The second thing is you could sell it on eBay, and whatever it generates there, the money is yours. Or don't make me sell it. I've always wanted a gumball machine. What's the third idea?" And I said, well, the third thing is we could put it on location, and then every week you and I will go there and replenish the gumballs that have been sold. We'll take the money from the sale, we'll share some of it with the venue owner because he needs a slice, and then you'll have your first form of passive income.
Oh, wow.
And what a way of teaching kids about passive income and how you can leverage your time. You know, going there once a week, it might take half an hour, depending where it is, of course, to get there, but an hour max. And then you have to buy your gumballs in bulk, and she would buy them, 850 of them in a box for $33,
Oh, wow.
but then sell them at a quarter each. So at a quarter, that's what, $212.50, but she had a cost price of $33. Now, it would take a while to get through them all, but that's not bad for an 8-year-old. And it also, I think, teaches the thing that you've got to share the revenue with other people who own some of the proprietary technology or whatever it is. In this case, it was the location. And she'd have to make the phone calls to see if we can, you know, put it at an ice skating den that we had in town at the time and other places. And to this day, she's 21 now, she's still got it on location at a place. And still goes there and replenishes the gumballs. And it's not so much the absolute amount of the money anymore, but it's just the principle. And if only each classroom had a project like this, where they had a vending machine or something else that could generate passive income, to teach these kids that they too can do it. But they don't. They teach them facts and figures. You have to memorize all the rivers of Canada or the mountains of South America and stuff like that, or the capital cities of the 50 states, most of which people don't really remember anymore. And you don't need to remember them because all of us, I even have one here, we have these things called smartphones with us, and we can pull them out and say, hey, whoever you're asking for advice on, be it Siri or whomever else, and say, you know, what's the main river going through whatever, South America? We don't need to memorize that stuff anymore. Why not teach kids about passive income? Because history has shown that when most people retire, and it includes this country, it includes the United States, we're the wealthiest country on this planet in terms of per capita income. When people retire, they barely can put their hands on $12,000 cash. And the savings they've got is not enough to last them more than 5 or 6 years of retirement. How is it possible that we have an 18-year education system where we don't teach people about financial freedom?
That's right. And it's super amazing that you just taught your daughter with just a simple, tiny little gumball machine. So for all the parents out there, it doesn't take a huge amount of effort to actually teach your kids this principle that passive income is something that is going to set their life for good forever, and also teach that to their future generations as well. So what are some of the other investment strategies or saving strategies that you would recommend parents to teach their children so they can learn about passive income?
Well, I think one of the best things you can do is share with your kids how finances work. So instead of saying, you know, you're a kid, you shouldn't know about it, let them know that a house, it's nice to own a house. Most kids don't know if their parents own the house or rent the house, and maybe they don't need to know. But if you do own the house, let them know that every year you pay property taxes on it. That's a fee you pay to the council. That covers things like trash collection and goodness knows what, that you have to pay for electricity. Give them a sense of that, because then they'll say, oh, so we shouldn't just leave the tap running while we're brushing our teeth or go outside and play with the ball and then say, oh, the tap's running, who cares? That there are consequences for these things. And again, none of these things of themselves is really dramatic. It's not going to save you $1 million. But as I always say, Marjorie, successful people don't do one thing 100% differently. They do 100 things 1% differently. And it's being able to discern all these little things and share them as to why it's smart to do things in a certain way. So I'd say just share as much information as kids ask about. And certainly if they ask questions, don't say, you're too young to know that. Never say you're too young to know. You know, they can figure it out. The fact that they're asking the question shows that they've reached an age where they're curious about it.
That's true. Yeah. And it is interesting how you mentioned about teaching our kids about, for example, taxes and how they work. I remember my mom, personally, she had 10 different little candies that she put on the table. And she said, okay, so 10 candies we have on the table, and we just got them from this jar. So we're going to separate 2 candies that are going to go for the water and electricity. That's the way she would say it. And then there's another candy that is going to go towards gas, and another candy that is going to go to the government because they are nice enough to give us this place to have a home. Now the rest of the candy is going to go to the jar. But what happens if you left the faucet open with a whole bunch of water just running through? Then 2 more candies are going to go to the water area. So you see how many candy you have left? That's how much you're going to have on the jar by the end of the day. We want to have more candy on the jar So let's make sure that we are like wise enough with the water, with the electricity, and all of the things that we are using in the house. And it was interesting how she showed me that with just like tiny little pieces of candy, so I could understand principles that we as adults deal with, such as paying all of these fees and taxes and other things that we know that we need to pay as adults. So there are multiple ways. To our audience right there, multiple ways that you can involve your kids in learning about their financial freedom and to know exactly how to be a better adult when they grow up. And as you mentioned, there's no age for them to learn that.
No,
education is for everyone.
That's so cool to hear that. I've never heard of that. And it's a great analogy. And I know some people are going to say, well, you shouldn't have to worry about, 10 gallons of water that gets wasted while you're brushing your teeth. So what? Even if it costs $1, you should, figure out a way of making $1 million extra a year so that doesn't become a problem. But you can scale this up to any level you want. And, if you've got a fancy Rolls Royce or whatever, you don't leave the engine running for half an hour to warm the engine up when it doesn't need warming up. In fact, one of the worst things you can do to a car engine is warm it up by not putting it under load because it wears out faster. So all these little things, and they do make a difference. And, the success of people is accumulation of lots of little things that they do. So it's fine-tuning it and showing kids principles and always telling your truth to them and expecting the truth from them. And, telling it as it is. Don't sugarcoat things. Just say, well, this is why we're in a crunch right now. Or there's a recession coming, and that's why we have to tighten our belts a bit. And let them be aware of what's going on, and then they'll come up with creative solutions. They always do.
That's true. So tell us, in your experience after teaching your daughter about all of these principles on passive income, how have you seen her mindset being changed now that she's an adult based on what you taught her?
Well, it's very difficult to ascribe any attributes that she may have to anything I've done. That seems to me to be a little bit almost bordering on arrogance to assume that one is a result of the other. But, she's studying at university, doing business entrepreneurship with a minor in fashion. She started her own fashion brand.
Oh, wow.
So she's got it in her head to create something. And that's, I think, one of the great things about people who want to, do well financially is they know they have to contribute. And Zig Ziglar said it best. He said, you can get whatever you want in this world as long as you help enough other people get what they want. And there are a million ways of doing this, and her chosen way for the moment anyway, is providing fashion that people really covet and want. And if you come up with zany enough designs, people will want it, and they'll pay for that. And then the manufacturer and everyone else in the supply chain can make a profit along the way. But that's how our capitalistic society works. And is everything about capitalism when you take to the extreme good? No, there's an element of greed that comes into it and, non-competitive natures of monopolies that develop. But the other end of the spectrum from that, where every decision is made by a central body, I think we've shown throughout history that doesn't work particularly well either. So I think where you let people to their own devices to create things, to contribute things, I think that is really a cool way of going, because then people end up getting and paying for what they really want, not what they're told that they need.
That's true.
So it's a free spirit. I think the best thing we can give kids is a free spirit. So instead of drumming into their brains that kids should be seen and not heard, and you're not old enough to have an opinion, and all that sort of stuff that crushes their spirit and stops their creativity, encourage their creativity. So even when they come up with a wacky idea, you can say, that is the most amazing wacky idea I've ever seen. I can't think of a practical use for it, but I love the creativity behind it. Can you see how it's different from, well, that's a bit stupid. What would you ever use that for? Who'd ever pay money for that?
Right. So negative.
And it crushes their spirit. And, I never had my spirit crushed as a kid. When I said I wanted to be an astronaut, they celebrated the fact that I had these high aspirations, rather than saying, well, statistically, the chances of you going into space are so remote it's not funny. Why don't you become reasonable and get a real job working in a factory or something? No, encourage people to think big. Because at the end of the day, any change in society comes from people who have thought big, who thought it was possible to make something different or better or smarter or faster.
That's right. Thank you so much again, Dolf. And thank you to our audience. So there you have it. Encourage your kids to think big so we can make a change in our future generations. We're going to see you on the next episode. Bye-bye.